Hi. So I'm really excited today because my last couple of videos I feel like my energy was a little bit lower, and especially the one where I talked about sort of like my journey this past year, the energy was and is a little bit sad around that. Today I'm really excited. I'm going to be trying to make my own coconut yogurt. I've tried fermenting sauerkraut. That's the only sort of foray into fermentation that I have attempted, so I'm excited to try something else. I don't know how it's going to turn out, but I'm going to give it a try. It seems relatively simple. You only need a few ingredients. The only place where I feel like things could go wrong is with the actual fermentation. You know, we might be venturing into dangerous territory, but I'm not really sure. We're gonna give it a try anyway. Fermented food is really, really good for your gut. It's really good for your gut microbiome. I forget what the number, it's either 70 or 80% of our immune system is based in our microbiome, in our gut. I mentioned in my last video I've had some issues with my gut, and so I try to stay on top of making sure that the bacteria in my gut is very diverse. That's really the cornerstone of a healthy immune system, a healthy body. There's a really strong connection between your gut and your mind. A lot of the chemicals that are used in pesticides, even if you're buying organic produce, there are still chemicals that are certified organic that can be used, and those chemicals interfere with and break down your gut lining and your gut microbiome. The other thing that contributes to that is antibiotics, and they're way overprescribed in this country. I was prescribed 4 different rounds of antibiotics in the time span of a year or a year and a half. It completely wrecked me and totally destroyed my microbiome, made me break out like crazy. And so now I try to stay on top of making sure that I have really good bacteria in my gut, make sure that it's very diverse, make sure that I'm eating a lot of wild fermented foods. You know, just popping a probiotic pill is not the same as eating fermented foods that have really wide varieties and lots of different strains of bacteria, because with a probiotic pill you're just getting certain strains of bacteria, whereas if you're eating something that's naturally fermented with the bacteria and fungi that are found naturally in the air and in like all of the particles floating around, that's going to be a lot better for your body. We use 5 times more antibiotics today in meat than in humans. So that means that the antibiotics are put in the food that we feed to the animals that we then eat, as opposed to the antibiotics that are prescribed to humans. That being said, yearly we use 7.7 million pounds of antibiotics prescribed to humans, and 30 million pounds of antibiotics are given to animals in meat production, and that's per year in North America. After just 1 course of antibiotics given to a human, you have an increase of 25% chance of experiencing major depression in those next following 12 months. Additionally, there's a 19% increase in the likelihood of a panic attack in those next 12 months after that round of antibiotics. So in addition to sort of like completely messing up your internal gut microbiome, they also really mess with your mood, they mess with your mind. There's a very direct connection, there's a direct link between your gut and every other part of you, really. I mean, it's such a huge part of who we are. I've been learning a lot about it. I'm certainly not the expert, but I have been trying to learn as much information as I can about it since I experienced so many issues with my gut. So, if you want to find out more about antibiotics and how they affect the gut, or just the gut microbiome in general, I would suggest checking out Dr. Zach Bush, MD. He has a great podcast, he has a great documentary. Just go to, I think it's drzachbushmd.com, or just Google him. And also check out Dr. Will B. He's another expert on the gut microbiome, and he just went on the Ritual podcast, which is how I was introduced to him, but he also has a book called Fiber Fueled. Anyway, that all being said, that's the reason why I'm making my own yogurt today. So let's do it. I'm going off of a recipe, and the recipe calls for 2 of these cans. They have to be the 400 milliliter cans. You can get full fat coconut milk. I think it would be like more of a creamy yogurt if you used full fat. So you need 2 of those cans, some tapioca starch, which is also known as tapioca flour. Oh my God. You need a store-bought yogurt. You can also buy like the probiotics instead of buying a yogurt, but I just bought the store-bought yogurt. You have to get something that already has the bacteria strains in it in order to ferment a new batch. And for sweetening, maple syrup. So these are the ingredients. There's the tapioca flour, also known as tapioca starch, same thing. Coconut milk. That's it. Wow, look how good that looks already. So creamy, so juicy. The other thing is that it calls for heating in the oven. So this is the part that I'm a little bit concerned about because it wants me to leave the oven door open, but I don't think I'm gonna do that. Once both of the cans of coconut milk are in the pot, you just whisk it up until they're both sort of mixed together. So then, in a separate bowl, you add the maple syrup and the tapioca starch. 2 tablespoons of tapioca starch. Guesstimations are probably not okay with a recipe like this, but you can learn from my mistakes. 2 tablespoons of maple syrup. Okay, that's 2 tablespoons. We're gonna mix this together until it's thick, the maple syrup and the tapioca starch. So that's really cool. It looks like a little caramel. We scoop out a little bit of this coconut milk. I haven't heated this or anything. So we're just gonna pour about 1/3 into this bowl and whisk it together. The coconut milk is like thickies. Whisk this together until the starch is dissolved and pour back into the pot. This is just such a thrill. Just trying to get all of that maple syrup mixture into the coconut milk. Now that everything is whisked together, we're gonna start to warm this coconut milk mixture on the stove, medium heat. So, the coconut milk started to simmer, which I assume means that it's like almost boiling and like the threat of boiling is there. So then it says to reduce the heat to low and whisk it for 5 to 10 minutes occasionally. So now the heat is on low and we're just gonna whisk it occasionally for 5 to 10 minutes. Once that's done, we're gonna let it cool and then we'll add the yogurt that I bought from the store and then we'll put it in the oven. So the coconut milk is taking a little bit longer than I thought it would to thicken up. I'm hoping that it will. And that's all I'm waiting for now. So once it thickens up, I'll take it off the heat and let it cool down. It's definitely thicker, but is it thick enough if I back it up? Is it fat enough? It's not. I'm gonna assume that this is thick enough and I'm gonna take it off the heat because I don't wanna burn it. I don't want it to be too hot. This is the thickness. So it's still like definitely a liquid. Just poured the yogurt into jars. This is about how much it made. It's like 2 and a little less than half jars. So now we just pop those in the oven. I did preheat the oven, but I'm gonna turn it off and then just keep them in the oven for probably 24 hours, just so they can chill in there and hopefully activate and ferment, and then we'll put them in the fridge. So we'll see how it goes. Hi everybody. So it's now day 3. So it's been in the oven for probably about 40 hours now. The oven hasn't been on the whole time, but I have turned it on to the lowest temperature and left it on for like an hour and then just kept the oven closed. So I'm hoping that that was enough heat to activate it. I've also seen some recipes online where people don't even put it in the oven, they just sort of leave it out and let it activate in the air, which I think is great. I was just following the recipe that used the oven. So I'm gonna take them out of the oven now and I'm gonna put them in the fridge and we're gonna let them cool for about 6 hours. Apparently, if I did this right, then once they are cool, there will be some separation once the yogurt is cooled down in the fridge. So we're gonna see if that happens. Hi. Okay, hopefully it's not too bright. Sorry, it's like the late afternoon, the sunlight is streaming in. It is hot, girl. It was like 100 degrees today. We went out hiking and over to the east side of San Francisco in Oakland, and I spent some time with the redwood trees. It was really, really beautiful, and it was only like 45 minutes outside of the city where I live. So that's what I was doing all day, but it was so hot. Anyway, I'm gonna check the yogurts now. They've been in the fridge chilling for about 6 hours. So if all went well, theoretically, they should be good now and ready. So let's see. Okay, so I don't know if you can see this. Probably not because it's the light of 1,000 suns. There's like the littlest bit of separation at the bottom here. I don't know if that means that they are not good. I'm gonna mix it around and taste it. Okay, so see that? So it was separated. Like I put the spoon in and it was liquid on the bottom and really hard on top. So I think that's a good thing. It's also like a little chonky. Well, I think what might have happened is it tastes like straight up coconut milk. Yeah. So I don't think it quite fermented. So what I'm gonna do now is leave them out in the heat. Like, I'm gonna leave them out in my apartment for just like 24 hours to see what happens. And then tomorrow I'll put them in the fridge again. I'll see if that little bit of extra fermentation helped. Otherwise, it might be a scratch. I have a feeling that me not turning the oven on was a factor here, but I'm not positive. Hi! It's now day 4 of the coconut yogurt, and I had them in the fridge. What I ended up doing was putting the yogurt out in the open. I took them out of the oven and I left them in the open on the counter, covered with cheesecloth, for about a day. And then this morning I put them in the fridge so that they could cool for about 6 hours. And I just took one out of the fridge and I'm really excited because it tastes really good, and it did separate. It was much thicker than it was originally when I had just put it in the oven. So I'll show you. This is what it looks like now. I mean, you can't really tell the difference, but it is much thicker. It's still pretty thin, but it's thicker than it was, and it tastes really, really good. I'm so excited. I think it worked, I think. I'll put the instructions for everything that I did and how many days it took in the description. It probably wouldn't have taken 4 days if I had just left them out on the counter. I have a feeling that putting them in the oven just kind of delayed the process. If you like this, definitely feel free to make your own. Probiotics are so good for you, and this is a great way of sort of taking your first step into fermentation. I hope it turns out good, and subscribe if you like, and I'll be back soon. Okay, bye.